Hello. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm really happy to be here. I'd like to thank all of you and especially your Kumu Lisa Kanali for inviting me to come and share about the importance of Kanaloa, man's relationship with Kanaloa, the Palawa, the Cetaceans, and also some of the challenges that we've met and some ways we want to change paradigms for a better future. Yeah, I think I want to also, I'm going to talk about the sacred things of the Kumulipo and things of that sort. So I just asked permission of my ancestors to abide and keakua na kua na makua to abide to protect our speaking and also to recognize my kumus. Some are living and some have passed. Mrs. Rubelite Kavena Johnson, my auntie Kamaka Hukilani, Vonelhoffen, and Kahuo Terangi, who have helped awaken me to many of these truths. Also, I'd like to recognize that much of this knowledge also comes from a collective body of practitioners in our Kia'i Kanaloa network. And yeah, so I'd like to start in that way. So to begin, Lisa, can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Sorry, you guys. I'm really new at this kind of presentation, so I'm usually just talk and I don't usually have anything written. So this will be my first time having something written. So let me see. I don't know that these notes come up. Hey, Lisa, how do you get the notes to come up from? Oh, okay. I got it. I got it. Sorry. So to begin our discussions, we should begin in the inquiry of the human and cetacean connection. We should begin and look to Nanaike Kumu, look to the source. The source that I'm referring to here is the Hawaiian chant of creation, the Kumulipo. My Kumu, I have her words here. It's an ancient chant comprised of more than 2,000 lines. It is a genealogical chant containing 2,000 names representing 812 generations. The sum of linear time in this history is about 23,300 years, or roughly one precession of the equinoxes dating back to about 21,000 BC. Many people believe that the Kumulipo perhaps is Proto-Polynesia. It was composed even before we came here. So, and I want to make a note here for the Olelo Hawaii speakers. When we talk of the sacred things, I don't want only a one-dimensional meaning. So oftentimes I will leave out the opinas or kahakos. That was how I was taught, and just recognizing that all knowledge does not come from one school, and I am speaking from my house of knowledge regarding the Kumulipo. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Yes. So from, does it do it? Yeah. So just a short outline about the structure of the Kumulipo. The Kumulipo is divided into what are called wa. Wa is an epoch or a period of time. There are a total of 16 wa in the Kumulipo. Wa is the sound that a baby makes when it first takes its breath, after its first breaths, and when it begins to cry. These, each wa also establishes a male and a female representation of the natural world. For example, a waterfall is considered male and a still pond is considered female. In every wa, the creation of a life form of the land that will become the guardian of the life forms that match it in the sea. So there's a pairing and a duality of energy in the Kumulipo. And in the early Wa, man is not present. Only the Akua, or the gods, exist at that point. So man does not enter until most of the life forms have already been created. So man's role is, as we see, as a part of creation, yeah? Okay, next slide, okay. So in the first Wa, the foundation of the natural world is forming, and from the primordial slime, the first life form, which is a coral polyp, and the coral colony begin to come out of the sort of chaos of the early time of creation, as all of the earth and everything is forming. It's important at this point to understand that man doesn't enter into the picture of creation until the 8th Wa, halfway through the chant of creation. But who does enter early on is the Palawa, or the Cetaceans. Now, when I refer to Palawa, Palawa generally means sperm whale, as we know it in modern terms. But Palawa is established in the Kumulipo because he is the deepest diver. And in Hawaiian taxonomy, the deepest diver would be be the first branch on the tree. So Palawa extends to Palawa because he comes into from the Kumulipo at the 2nd Wa. He's part divine and part physical as well, and so that gives him an element of sacredness throughout all of Polynesia, actually. So the pole is the deep, deep darkness, and there are 2 poles that we know of today and that still exist. That is in the highest heaven, the deepest, darkest purple pole, the Luna Lilo, outer space, but also in the deepest, darkest purple ocean down in the bottom of the ocean. And many of you know that Papahanaumoku is an entranceway to that ocean pole, whereas Mauna Kea is the entranceway to the heavenly pole. Okay, I think I can go next slide. Okay, so, sorry, I have to go on the next slide. Okay, so basically, all of the gods, the primary gods, Kanaloa, Kaane, Lono, and Ku, all play a role in this creation. And the Palawa in this, as cetaceans, play a role in there to help usher not only the time of Ao, or the time of the light, but also mankind enters the world through their song and through their chant. So they become these hierarchical Akua, God, that we must acknowledge as that, as our elder sibling, as a demigod that helps usher us into being. Now, the importance of that is that also ushers us, that also helps define our role in all of creation. And why I'm spending so much time on this is because to really understand this connection from the Hawaiian worldview, we need to start at the beginning of where that sacredness is attached to the cetaceans. Now, also, it's important to know that, oh, I think I can go to the next slide, sorry. So in this slide, you can see part of the English translations of the Kumulipo regarding whales. So in the lead, the whales proceed, mingling, submerging beneath the sea. The opue advance in the distance. The deep ocean is filled with them, like the kumimi crabs clustered on the reef. They swallow along the way, the pathway. So this is some of the language in the Kumulipo as translated by Mrs. Rublight Kavenna Johnson. So to understand the full breadth and power of Kanaloa, we have to look at Kanaloa's bodily forms that go beyond just cetaceans, okay? This is important because this depicts the kinds of power, yeah, that Kanaloa possesses in the Polynesian mind, yeah? So Kanaloa, first and foremost, is the god of the sea. So the whole ocean, the whole element of the ocean is a bodily form of Kanaloa. All animals that are born in the sea but breathe air, such as whales, dolphins, but also honu and monk seals, are kinolau, or divine bodily forms of the god Kanaloa. But there's also mano, whale sharks, hahalua and hihimanu, manta rays and stingrays. Also animals that have white spots, yeah, like the whale shark and certain hihimanu. Kanaloa is also star forms. So Kanaloa is found in the high heavens, for example, as the Southern Cross constellation. Kanaloa has sky forms, land forms, and land and water forms, right? Kanaloa also takes shapes such as, and numbers. So the shapes of the kite, so animals that have shapes of the kite, but also animals with 8 elements. Kanaloa is a part of our navigation. Some of those animals that include 8 are the opeapea, the bat, and also he. And so, so what this helps us understand is these are all of Kanaloa's bodily forms and manifestations in the world around us. At this point, it's important also to bring up the fact that the pairing from the Kumulipo establishes the existence of the Palawa, or the Cetaceans, but their guardian on the land is the sandalwood. And at that point, it's important to know that if you look at our history, what we see is our contact with the West. Some of the early stuff we see is the sandalwood trade, okay? The sandalwood trade devastates our forest, but what comes right on the tails of that is also the whaling. Comes to the Pacific and the world, nearly devastating and nearly bringing some of our whales to extinction. So it's just an important thing. We can actually see it in the modern time. We can see how the pairing, the guardian on the land, is devastated and therefore cannot protect the element in the animal of the sea, which is the whale. So the sandalwood and the whale come together even in this modern time. I think we can go, oh no, I wanted to add one more point. What we're also learning from the Kumulipo is man's role because of his placement in the creation, right? It helps to demonstrate that all other living things have to come into being before even man comes in. When man comes in in the 8th wa, man opens his eyes and the light enters the world. So what what whaling did, it produced light in the world, which is a strange irony, but I'm not sure we can say that it brought enlightenment. And it begins to bring us into a modern era of where it's kind of a dark time. But there's more. Okay, so I think we can go to the next slide. So as we're leaving the sacred Kumulipo discussion, we're going to enter into the mundane and even perhaps the profane, and the time of the 17 and 1800s when the whaling comes along and that sparks what we know now as the Industrial Revolution. And it's important, we can see the ancient relationships between the palawa and the sandalwood, right? But we can also go back to the idea that that which is on the land must protect that which is in the sea. So one of the things that we like to talk about is Moby Dick. And the reason why is because Moby Dick is a classic American novel, one of my favorite books, but a difficult book to read, particularly if you love the Kanaloas, right? In the book, we see Captain Ahab's obsession, right? And I think some people argue that it was his vengeance for the whale, the white whale, right? Who took his leg at a certain point. And so he becomes obsessed with finding and killing that whale. But what's interesting, I think, about Moby Dick is that he also represents man's obsession, I think, even in the book, of domination and control over nature, because the white whale represents nature or God or divinity, yeah? And so, and we remember the whole whaling industry brings to light the light, right? But where's the enlightenment? Through the death and destruction of the Kanaloa. So in the end, however, what's important, and even today we're looking at a situation with the COVID, nature wins. So this is an important theme that I think I want to talk about and expand on, is how nature wins and how some of the fallacies that we have carried through with these concepts of domination and man's place become challenges even to this day and in the modern world. So I think next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our case and our work with NOAA. And I hope there's some of our friends in Ohana that are a part of our Kia'i Kanaloa network who will remember and understand this case. This is an image of Vananalua. And Vananalua was a little melon-headed whale who stranded in Kauai Harbor. I can't remember dates, sorry, I had stroke, so I have difficult times with dates, but now, you know, about 6 years ago or so. So Roxanne Stewart, she's now Dr. Roxanne, and I don't know if she's listening, but her and I responded to this, this call for this whale. Some of the community had called us and let us know, and that a Kanaloa was in distress, and so we went down to render aid. We essentially stayed with her, held her up so she could breathe easily. for many, many hours throughout the night. There were some NOAA people that came to take her heart rate and things like that. But then they eventually left at some point during the night, and we didn't really even notice that they left because we were totally focused on being in the water with the whale. Other practitioners, we called a number of them, including Pua Case and her halau and her children. They came. A Maori woman, Nahuya, Sharni Murphy, came while Rox and I were there, and some of the other halau sisters came to render aid also. At about 1:30 a.m., Vananalua made her final death swim and expired. And at that point, we wrapped her in a sheet, sort of to lift her up so that we could, we slept kind of in the water, out of the water. It's a little sharky over there, so you kind of have to, we didn't want the sharks to, you know, start taking bites. Anyhow, in the morning, we saw no one. There was no one on the beach. I walked the beach personally to try to see if there were any NOAA representatives. There were not. So a few hours, maybe about an hour later, some people came and asked us if, with a boat, and asked us if they could render assistance. And so we made the decision to see no one and hearing nothing from NOAA from the night before that they would return to claim her body or anything like that. We took her out to sea for a traditional burial, to return her back to the pole and return her back to the cycle of life. We weighted her down a bit so that she would not float back up or become a problem. And then somewhere around October 15th, I think, right before the stand on Mauna Kea in 2015, NOAA had sent officers to Roxy's school. Roxy was a school teacher at that point. And numerous times they sent people to Pua Case's house to question her about this event. And they had begun to issue a citation for Roxy and I for a taking. A take meaning under the federal law, they construed it as a take because essentially we had not asked them for permission to traditionally bury the whale. There is the Marine Mammal Protection Act that comes into play, but taking involves, there's two kinds of taking, an A and a B form, and we really didn't meet the criteria for either A or B. And so nevertheless, we were being prosecuted and cited and with potentially large fines. So we decided, Roxy and I decided to fight this because it was, we felt really important that we not set a precedent that NOAA, a federal agency, should be citing Native Hawaiian practitioners for practicing their traditional practice. And I want to be clear, our relationship with NOAA didn't start with Vananalua. It started many years before that. And we were invited by our friend who was working for NOAA at that time to help build better relationships between NOAA and Native Hawaiians, because there have been difficulties in the past, like for example with monk seals and other strandings, and in general Native Hawaiians, you know, because of our relationship with the United States from the overthrow, the occupation, and the general abuse of Native Hawaiian rights and resources, you know, there's some challenges, and there's also some jurisdictional questions that I think are really legitimate, and those are, you know, that there's state jurisdiction, there's federal jurisdiction, right? And so we had trepidation. Both Rox and I really met during that time. And when we discussed it, I think we all, and Erica, Ho'oululahui Perry, discussed it, and we all recognized that we had trepidation in trying to, if it was possible to actually work with NOAA, because we had seen a lot of things that we didn't agree with. But I think we all decided that we would attempt to work with NOAA to help raise the standard of aloha and to see if we could build stronger and better relationships for the protection of our Kanaloa. So you'll see some pictures after this of some of the work that we did. These pictures are produced by Elsie Butler, who took photographs for the Hawaii magazine. But I think we can go to the next one. The next slide, please. So what I want to say is that our relationship was quite long, actually, and it was very shocking for us to know that we had participated and assisted NOAA in all of these things, including even building strong relationships with the volunteers, doing modules that with the cultural aspects and practices included in the NOAA training for live strandings, and also monk seal, you know, haul outs and things like that. So we had built this strong relation. This is Roxy, by the way, and this this Kanaloa here, his name is Kamaui. And Kamaui was a Blainesville beaked whale, and we had the honor of participating in caring for him for about 14 days with all of there were about, you know, about 150 volunteers, I think, maybe even more. And this took place at a time when NOAA had joined forces with the university to create a small dolphin, small whale and dolphin and marine mammal rehab facility down in Kealoha. And who was a part of opening this was Dr. Jason Turner and his wife, Jennifer Turner, of the time. And it was an amazing thing. At first, we weren't sure how to interact with each other, but we built really strong relationships with all of the volunteers, relationships that exist still to today. And Kamaui was an amazing Kanaloa and an amazing being to be in his presence. Roxy gave him the name Kamaui because he was originally came to the people of Maui. And in fact, that was one of the first conflicts that NOAA got into with the community. They flew to Maui and put Kamaui in a Coast Guard, giant Coast Guard plane and brought him to Hilo. But the people on Maui for whom he came to did not like that and were upset. So Rox spent a lot of time, and Erica spent a lot of time to try to mihi that, to asked for their forgiveness so that we could take care of the Kamaui and hopefully to bring him back when he has passed. Now, some of the problem is that to this day, I don't even know, I think this was in 2010 or something. If anyone remembers, put it in the chat, please. So that was a long time ago. And to this day, we still do not have Kamaui's bones back. And it's very important for people to understand our position as Native practitioners has never been against necropsy. It has been that after necropsy, in fact, we wrote a letter to NOAA asking them, you know, to take Kamaui's bodily remains for a year if need be, and then ask them to return him back so that we could bring him back to Maui and do traditional burial for his remains. To date, NOAA has not given Kamaui or Vaikini or Vananalua or, no, not Vananalua, but what was the other one? Any of the live stranding bodily parts so that we could bury him traditionally and properly. There is a misunderstanding also that we don't oppose euthanasia. We are generally opposed to it if there are other ways to address it. For example, recently in Maui, we were there and we asked NOAA for permission to attempt to refloat them after they stranded. And we were denied that. And NOAA called the state enforcement officers on, you know, to be present. They were afraid that we were going to do something. And we were simply asking to give these Kanaloa who are stranding on the beach on Maui a second chance to recover, because stranding can be very traumatic. And sometimes they can recover. Oftentimes you can identify the one who is the sickest, but the other ones follow them, yeah? So it was just an attempt to help restore, but we could not do that because they had sedated them. And that means that they can't be returned because they're voluntary breathers, and the sedation is the precursor to the euthanizing. So there were a number of whales that could have been restored, but because of the policy and practice that NOAA continues to uphold, they couldn't be recovered. So that was another incident. We have lists and lists and lists of such incidents across the whole archipelago. So that's generally what's gone on. There's lots more to tell on that story, but I want to go to some next frames, I think, if you can. Oh yeah, that's just myself, and that's Kamaui. Let's see. Okay. Oh, actually, can you go to the next one? This one. So this one is an image of the cetacean rehab facility people and the vets, and there's Rox helping, and there's Jason Turner in there. And basically Rox is just there to help provide support, because we were able to establish certain protocols where cultural practitioners can come in and assist to obtain the science. And how that form comes about is we're assisting by helping to relax them, in and actually feel into things. Yes, Kamali was with us in past. Yes, there's Erica right there. Ho'olulahui Perry. So, so as long we kind of had an agreement with NOAA, so long as anything we were doing was helping them get the science, that we wouldn't have any problems. And unfortunately, we did help them get the science. I mean, Kamali, it was a perfect example. No one needed to restrain him to even tube feed him, which is normally a very difficult thing to, put the tube in, their stomach. And they often fight that. But, here again, doing the ceremonies, doing the prayers, doing the chants, and the protocols, it helps to calm them. It restores their ancestral memory of their connection and our connection to each other. And so we were building a good kind of relationship, where you have the best cultural knowledge and the best science available. Okay, yeah. And so this is a perfect example, perfect image of there's Kamaui being relaxed, being calm, and they're able to do all of these things for the science. Okay, so I guess where I want to go next is to talk about, kind of in my summary, I want to share where I think we need to go. And I mean, obviously there's political things that we need to do, but there's also paradigm shifts that we need to establish and start to take into our heart, okay? And when I say that, we are in a crisis in the world. We are being faced with so much uncertainty. And it's based upon a form of thinking that needs to change, needs to be updated, needs to be brought into the real world, and the kinds of thinking that I'm saying is, number one, that we are separate from nature. We are not separate, and we cannot be separate. Now, recognizing, I think that the element of separation comes in sort of a socio-religious concept with Western Christianity and things like that lend to the idea that man by nature is bad, and that man is allowed to have dominion over nature. But when you begin to shift your worldview to understand that man is a part of nature and a part of the web of life, then you start to see things differently. So how we view the world is how we treat the world. And Uncle Kaliko always says, if we see someone as enemy, we will treat them as enemy. If we see someone as friend, we will treat them as friend. And in this context, when we have reverence for the beings and all life around us, because we start to recognize that we are a part of that web. And from the Hawaiian cosmology, we are actually the younger sibling of all of these ancient ones, yeah? And to most life, to most of nature. And so when we start to shift the way we see the world, then the world will start to shift, because this paradigm, this sort of nature is kind of Hobbesian world, nasty, brutish, and short idea. And also a huge fallacy that exists is that that the default is competition rather than cooperation. These are huge, huge different ways of seeing the world, you know? For example, when we start to view the world in the common of the greater good, in the sense of the greater good, take the ocean, for example. One of the things we're working on is there's new evolving international law, and that integrates indigenous worldviews I'm going to say resource, but I'll talk about changing that paradigm too, that are being affected, right? So there's this evolving concept about how do we protect the open ocean, right? Because the ocean belongs to everyone, but is in the high seas, right? The deep ocean belongs to everyone, but it is controlled by no one, okay? And here, again, we're looking at how do we do that? And it's here again, the law of the sea, right? Basically favors exploitation of the oceans. We have a lot of laws that actually understand that there are certain things that exist in the world that are common and belong to the common, therefore everyone, and should be regulated and or supported on behalf of everyone, okay? But what we have is regulatory agencies that regulate in favor of private use and exploitation and not in favor of the greatest good. So these are the concepts that we're trying to huli, you know, we're trying to shift and change, because personally, I believe the whole ocean should be a protected area, not just areas like Papa, right? Not just areas like the Great Barrier Reef. The whole ocean should be construed as a common and protected in the interest of the common good. We have situations where 90% of the population of mano, sharks, has been reduced. And what are we doing about it? See, because what happens in the environmental discussions is the failure of regulation is we get into these policy paradoxes where we know what needs to occur, but we fail to do it. We fail to act in a timely manner, in an effective way. And it's because we base everything on the exploitation. And so I want to get back to some of this languaging. See, we continue to use the term resource, and I get it. There's nothing wrong with using that term. However, resource inherently connects us to exploitation, or the idea of exploitation. It shouldn't, but it does. So when we're talking about the ocean, when we're talking about the mountain, when we're talking about fresh water, when we're talking about the wind, the sun, and all of these things, these are commons, and they're also sources of life, because man cannot live without them. So we need to start looking at, you know, for all the students, you know, we need to start looking at changing those language and recognizing that we want to change it in favor of its protection as opposed to exploitation. You know, there's the tragedy of the commons, right? That because the open ocean is free, it therefore should be exploited or can be exploited, right? But no, it actually needs to be managed and controlled in a collective way for the greatest good for all, because the ocean is a source. Like fresh water, it's a source. You know, and we have all of these incredible laws like the Clean Water Act, but how's that working? Like in Hawaii, yeah, the majority of our streams in freshwater are contaminated in one form or another, and or there's water theft. So extreme taking by one entity over the other entities, over the greater public. So there's actually laws that support these things, like the public trust doctrine, and Hawaii has very strong laws sometimes that help protect that, but it requires people to challenge them in a court of law. But the crisis that we're coming up on, not only the great extinction on our planet and global warming and all of these things, plus even COVID, these, every one of them are, COVID in particular, we can actually see is a function of our mistreatment of the animal world. You know, breaking through these barriers. Some of these diseases that are most challenging are because we're eating wild animals that we shouldn't. They become a vector to introduce some of these very bad diseases, things of this nature. So, oh, can we go to the next slide? Sorry. So I don't want to end on a dreary note. I want to end on the fact that the Kanaloas are coming out. They're stranding, and we are attempting to reconnect. We want to reconnect to them, to reconnect to the whole, right? So it isn't just because we're a Native Hawaiian, and this is not only a Native Hawaiian issue, although I must say that Native Hawaiians are disproportionately handled differently. But nevertheless, this is a human problem. I learned recently that there's a new term called I think it's called Anthropocene or Capitalocene. Someone correct me, I don't know how to say it right, but basically the time of man. It's recording what man is doing. I think it's called Capitalocene because, you know, they're looking at the capitalist model as being the most destructive. But I guess what I want to say to that is that the humans have the power to make the change. And from a political standpoint, we have 3 branches of government, right? One rules on law, one makes law, and the executive enforces the law, generally. So when those 3 branches of government become captured by industry, then we as humans have a problem. But the counter to this problem is the people must rise up and stand for what we care about and what we love. And I know that it feels daunting to do so, but what are the choices? Because we don't really have a lot of time. And the function of a regulatory agency is to regulate and balance the needs of the many with the needs of the few. And they're actually supposed to favor the needs of the many over the needs of the few, particularly when it comes to extraction of water and all of these kinds of extractive activities. These extractive activities are to be regulated in favor of the greatest good. So when you go back to our case, NOAA is prosecuting us while the sonar is taking thousands of animals indiscriminately, including endangered species. We don't know, right? The longliners in Hawaii they tow miles of line with millions of hooks, and they just circle our whole archipelago, making it difficult for the fish to even come into Hawaii or go out of Hawaii without getting hooked. We have excessive aquarium trade. All of these things we're working on in fighting. We have RIMPAC, the military exercises that are causing frustrating the peaceful existence of all of our cetaceans who rely on sound, you know, and it shouldn't matter who is doing it. What matters is that the people rise up to say, hey, no, you know, so we need to flip the paradigm and say it is not basically everything in the ocean is protected, and if you want to extract or hurt or injure, you have to argue why we the people should allow you to do that. This is the kind of consciousness that we're going to need for the future if we're going to make the change in the time we need to make it for ourselves to survive as well. Because like I said, there are scientific methods to reduce our bias, yeah? But ultimately we cannot remove ourselves from the very nature that we are watching and observing and participating in. And I don't know if any of you have seen recently My Octopus Teacher. It's a great movie on Netflix. But there exactly he says at the end of the film that I'm not an observer, I'm a participant. So we as the humans not only have a responsibility, because remember, the light entered the world as we opened our eyes. That is to teach us that we can be enlightened, right? But we are not enlightened if we do not act in accordance to that enlightened path. The Kanaloas are coming out as messengers. They are culturally messengers. They bring us deep understanding. And when they come out and suffer, we have to take that to heart and try to our best to ameliorate that suffering and to let them know that they are not forgotten or alone. So we as cultural practitioners take the decision and choice to render assistance where we can. And while the case took us about 6 years to litigate, our last effort that we could do, because the administrative law judge, while acknowledging she believed that we came from a sincere and honest belief system, she couldn't rule on it's something called strict liability, that she cannot rule on why you did it, it's just if you did it. And she also could not rule on constitutional rights. So our last ditch effort was that we had the ability to write to the Secretary of Commerce. The Department of Commerce oversees NOAA, and we did write to him. And we laid out our arguments for why this happened, and we asked him to overturn our conviction. And he actually remanded our case back and instructed the administrative law judge that she was able to rule on our constitutional, both US as well as state constitutional rights. And ultimately, we probably would have won the case because we filed our opening brief and NOAA then dropped the charges. So in a way, it is a win, I suppose. They still can bring charges back up against us again. But ultimately, it's not about winning or losing. It's about raising the standard of aloha. It's about finding our common humanity and finding where we can come together to find solutions. And so, you know, as Uncle Kaliko always shares, if we see people as enemy, we have to treat them as enemy. So I guess I'm promoting the idea of staying in our kapu aloha, which is the way to, which opens our heart and our compassion for a greater good. And I think that is the lesson that in all of it, because yes, we were convicted. Yes, we were prosecuted for 6 years. We had to fight, and it took a lot of money and a lot of time. But it was for the Kanaloa, and it was for our continued relationship, because as Kanaka of this land, we have a right to continue our ancient relationship with Kanaloa, and our cousins of the whole Pacific, the Moana Nui, because the ancient way of seeing us is that the peoples of the Pacific are the peoples of the whale. And so the whole Pacific Ocean, Moana Nui, we are connected by the whales. Okay, and so I think that's my major thesis or my plea, that we restore our humanity, and that while we face difficult challenges, we have to face them in the interest of the greatest good, for all of the life on the planet and all of the humans as well, because we are one and the same. And that's one of the biggest lessons of the ocean. And so, Lisa, we can go to the last slide. And I think I'm done, except for I wanted to make sure you understood that many of the Kumulipo references come from this, the Kumulipo by Mrs. Johnson. And Eric Enos provided many of the images, the drawings, and you can find him here. And also the photos are provided by Elsie Butler, and you can find her as well. And also you can email me at, or you can find out more about Kaipalawa and the Kia'i Kanaloa network at kaipalawa.com, or you can email me also.